Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So it is time for my April wrap-up. I got to the end of the month and was a little surprised. I thought that I had been reading a fair bit, but I definitely just read a bunch right at the end of the month, and it was only 9 books. So, so what happened was I did start a number of books, and so my currently reading shelf is like 6 or 7 books long, and I got 50 pages in this one and 100 pages in this one, but I haven't finished those. So May might be big, and or I might just stop reading those. So anyway, what did I read in April? I finished 9 books. All of them were new to me books, no rereads. And that was a total of 3,352 pages of finished content. I didn't really track all those little bits of things that I didn't finish. Ultimately, that was 1 physical book, 2 e-books, and 6 audiobooks, digital audiobooks. So let's dive right in. The one and only physical book that I finished in April, actually, this is wrong. I think I did 10 because Okay, so a second ago when I said that I had only read 9 books, I definitely read 10. I knew I read more this month, and that's because the book has been sitting in here and I never logged it on Goodreads. Go me. So I'm just going to stick it in the middle, I think. So what have I read in April? Actually 10 books. I just was looking at my list and saw another book sitting right here, and it didn't make my list. So numbers are wrong. I'll put them down here at the bottom of the screen. But what was the first book I finished in April? The first book I finished in April was Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the 3rd book in the Brown Sisters trilogy. I believe the trilogy is over, though it wouldn't surprise me if she did like a spin-off series with related characters. We follow Eve Brown, and her love interest in this book is named Jacob. I quite enjoyed this book. I think most people really enjoyed this book. I'm not sure exactly what my ranking of the sisters is, but this book has good fat rep, it has good autism rep, there are a number of tropes going on. It's a like workplace romance, opposites attract, kind of grumpy sunshine. And yeah, so we follow Eve. She has always been told to act your age, to kind of grow up, to be more responsible. And at the start of the book, her parents kind of are tired of her floofing around, in their opinion, and so they kind of put their foot down a little bit, and so she says, I'll show them, and she rushes off, and she kind of is in a tizzy, but then she calms down and sees a help wanted sign, and she's like, well, I'm gonna get a job. That's what I'm gonna do. And so the interview does not go great, and so she's leaving, again, kind of emotional as she's leaving this bad job interview that she didn't even like really for sure want before she saw the sign, and she accidentally hits Jacob, the guy who's hiring this position and who just gave her this interview, with her car. So, whoops. But then she feels guilty, and so she decides to stay on at his bed and breakfast to help him out because she just hit him with his car and he is injured and can't be at full capacity right now. So then hijinks ensue and romance. I did speak more about this book in a live show with the Sugar and Spice Book Club. I will put a link up in the cards and down in the description. You should check out our awesome discussion on this book. And ultimately, I gave Act Your Age, Eve Brown a 3.75 stars. The next book that I finished in April was an audiobook. I listened to A Good Neighborhood by Therese Fowler. I read this for one of my real life book clubs, and it's a literary fiction book where we follow a number of people in a neighborhood. Actually, the voice and like narrative voice of this book is very interesting because it's written from this 3rd person. It sounds like the neighborhood is talking to you, or the people who are part of the neighborhood collectively, kind of royal we are talking to you, the reader. So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective. Some people really didn't like that element, but I thought it was fine. My frustration about this book, which follows, the premise is that a mom and her son who have lived in this area for a really long time, it's in North Carolina, they have a nice house, and they have, she's a botanist or something. And so she has this big, huge, gorgeous old oak on their property, toward the back of the property. And then someone buys the lot behind them and they tear out all the trees and they build a little McMansion, a big McMansion and a pool, and the family moves in. And so they're, the family that moves in is white. Valerie and Xavier are black, or Xavier is half and half. And it becomes apparent to Valerie, the botanist, that the guidelines were not followed during the building codes and stuff. And so the oak, this big, beautiful, glorious oak that she has tended for years and that she has great memories with her, you know, of her kid and of their family, you know, together, has been like fatally wounded in the construction. And so she decides to sue this, his name's Brad, and he sucks. She decides to sue Brad because she knows that he like cut corners with the zoning commission, blah, 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 blah. So she wants to kind of teach him a lesson. But this book tackles a lot of really big topics. There's like justice and racial issues and class issues that are all trying to be handled here. And for me, at first, I really felt a lot of that. I mean, it's kind of a slow start, but then once stuff starts happening, I really was feeling like my emotions were being manipulated and there was high drama, but also all of the characters were just caricatures and were really written to be caricatures and be kind of one-dimensional. And for me, that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I felt on the one hand, that made them sort of relatable because you can think, oh, I know someone who's just like that. They fit that mold. And I think that was part of the point. But also, I just don't feel that the writing was quite strong enough, or that the characters were quite strong enough to try to tackle all these really big issues. So it definitely like hit me hard while I was reading it, but like kind of as soon as I was done, I didn't feel like it held up the whole weight. And I didn't love the ending and how the actual plot resolves. And it kind of has a couple trigger warnings for, you know, like racial injustice and slurs and violence, and as well as some pedophilic thoughts. Anyway, there's not direct actions. So there's like a lot of skeeve factors also happening. So I appreciated what she was trying to do, what the author was trying to do, but I just didn't feel that it quite was pulled off super well. So ultimately I gave A Good Neighborhood 3 stars. And I think that over the course of the month, as this has settled, it might be even a little bit lower than that. The next book I read was Parental Guidance by Avery Flynn. This book is actually really forgettable to me. I saw it on my Goodreads and I had to like click through and read the description to even remember what it was about. But we follow Zara and Caleb. He is a pro hockey player, and at the start of the book, some of his teammates have been caught on camera saying stupid stuff about women, kind of degrading to women. And so because he wants to be a team captain or vice captain or whatever it is, he is like, I'm going to take one for the team and do a PR stunt. And so he agrees to join a dating app that his mom, who is also his hockey coach or a hockey coach, where she will pick out his dates. And then Zara is our main female character, and she's just so quirky. She's just so petite and feisty and quirky and has flaming red hair. And that's like literally all I remember about her. But she's like a workaholic. She makes miniature displays, and her dad I don't know, because her best friend says something, wants her to date, and her dad says something, they both agree to go on these dates. And at the start of the first dates, they're both instantly attracted to each other, but they set out these ground rules that like, this isn't going to be real. They're just doing this for their various reasons. And of course, love ensues because romance. For me, the premise was kind of weak. I did not think that there was good emotional development between the two, because they had agreed right up front that they were just going to go on these 5 dates. And then yes, they do start spending more time together, but I wanted more of them realizing that the other person was a good person or that that person was a good fit for them. And it really just didn't feel that that was happening. It felt that they went on a date and then at the end they thought, wow, I really could be falling for this guy. And I'm like, why? There was some quick and hot sex, but it was quick. And to me, this parental guidance was just really forgettable, so I only gave it a 2-star. So I would give Avery Flynn another chance, though. The next book I finished was the audiobook of Pleasure of a Dark Prince. This is the next book in the Immortals After Dark series. It's number 8. This is by Kresley Cole, and we follow Lucia and Gareth. And this book I really, really enjoyed. I felt like it was much strong. We kind of were on an upswing after number 7 or 6 and 7, and I really enjoyed this story. There was a lot of action, there was some suspense, there was a lot of tension sort of throughout. I felt that Lucia was just the right amount of sort of desperate but also determined and sort of badass, and Gareth was protective but like in a good way, and I felt like he rode that perfect alpha line for me. I really enjoyed going to the Amazon. I really enjoyed seeing all the other characters in this book who are going to be characters in future books, I predict. So yeah, I really loved the ending and how they get their happily ever after and how that works out. So ultimately I gave Pleasure of a Dark Prince 4 stars. The next book that is not on my list, but I'm going to talk about now, that I read, is Crazy Stupid Bromance. I read this, which is by Lyssa K. Adams. I read this actually aloud to my husband, and we vlogged it, and I have that sitting in bits that need to be edited together on my computer. So that's why I had forgotten about this. So this is the next book in the Bromance series. I think this is the 3rd book. We follow Alexis and Noah. Obviously, really made a strong impact when I had to look at that. We follow Alexis and Noah. Alexis was my character from a previous book. She has been a previous victim of sexual assault. She's a survivor. She runs a coffee shop. She had met Noah, I think, in one of the previous books. He is a tech whiz, used to be a hacker. And so this is their love story. You can definitely stay tuned for that vlog. I'm hoping it'll come out later this week or maybe next week on this book. But ultimately, I did really enjoy Alexis's character and her arc. I felt like she was a hair too perfect, she was just a little too saintly. But Noah I didn't really like Noah. He just ticked it. I don't know, reading this aloud felt a lot more cheesy than I think it would have come across if I was reading it just in my head, or even if I've been listening to the audiobook. So I can't remember exactly what rating I gave it. I think I just gave it kind of a middle of the road 3-star. But yeah, keep an eye out for a vlog coming soon on Crazy Stupid Bromance. The next book I finished in April was One by One by Ruth Ware. This is a mystery thriller. We have 2 points of view, and we follow a number of characters in sort of a locked door mystery where they are stuck in a ski chalet in France after an avalanche has happened. Most of the people there are people who work together or used to work together in this fancy tech company, and then we have the 2 people who are kind of running the chalet, and there's an avalanche, and then people start dying, and so there's a big mystery as to whodunit. I felt like this was kind of predictable. I wanted more from the characters, and I wanted more oomph. I did a long discussion of this in a different video, which I will link up in the cards and down in the description, where I did a discussion with my friend Curtis. So check out that video if you want our full thoughts on One by One. But ultimately, I was just kind of not that thrilled. I felt like it was a very strong kind of middle, but not a great start or end. So I was a little underwhelmed by One by One, but I gave it a 2.5 star rating. The next 3 books were all from the same series. I decided to go hard with a new to me subgenre of alien romance, and I read the first 3 books. So what did I listen to? I listened to all three of these. The first one is Fire in His Blood by Ruby Dixon. This is a alien romance where it's sort of a post-apocalyptic world where the heavens opened up, there's this rift, and these dragon creatures come pouring through, and they just kind of destroy a ton of humanity and the physical like buildings and destroy the world. So this is 7 years after the rift. This first book follows Claudia and Kyle. I felt like it kind of had a slow start because we were laying out all that groundwork of the world and building, but it had a good, strong ending. I felt like the author, it almost felt a little bit, if I took a big step back, as if the author had been sort of struggling at the start and then kind of found her footing by the end. But I think I think there really was just trying to spend some time laying that groundwork at the start. I did feel that it was sexy, but also it was like a little too fast to jump into that. And I loved how alpha Kyle was, but also he was so loving toward Claudia. So I gave this book 3 stars, and I'm thinking about doing a whole separate video on these 3 books, which is why I'm kind of going quickly through them and not really discussing the plot, because I really am having a lot of thoughts about these 3, which are just the first 3 in the series. I think we're up to 8 books or so in the series, and I'm currently in the middle of book 4. But so the book 2 is Fire in His Kiss, again by Ruby Dixon. This is book 2 of this Fire Blood Dragon series. In this book, we follow Sasha and Doc. Sasha is Claudia's friend from book 1, and this book definitely followed more of a like romance book structure that was more familiar. So I felt like the stage had been set with book 1, and then with every book I can see more and more backstory and threads being woven into the entire series and world. So I'm appreciating that. Sasha was just this really great survivor kind of character. She did what she had to do to survive, and I could really admire that. And then I felt like Doc, he had more point of views in this book than Kyle had in book 1, which I think rounded out his character better. And I definitely felt like there was more sexy time, not more, but there was equal amounts of sexy times, if not more sexy times, but also those sexy times were more fun and the relationship was more fun, but not as fun as the third book. So I gave Fire in His Kiss, book 2, 3.5 stars. And book 3 is Fire in His Embrace, again by Ruby Dixon. This one we follow Emma and Zor. Emma is just super scrappy, and she's very like survivalist, and in book 2 she definitely came across as a sort of a tomboy, but I think that was just in comparison to Sasha, who was described as, she describes herself and Emma describes her as very like feminine and like girly. So, but I really enjoyed seeing from Emma's point of view the like sort of survival but scrappiness, that her like go get 'em attitude was great. And then Zor was even more fun and more like flirtatious and sarcastic than our other previous dragons. So that was kind of fun to bring that element in. And again, this was like almost a romantic suspense. She says, having not really read romantic suspense, just because there was, and I guess it was maybe like romantic adventure, because there were some mystery to it, but also it was a little bit more adventure, go off and have something to accomplish. But I really I've enjoyed these 3 books. Obviously I read the first one and I was like, well, I'm just gonna keep on reading. I read all 3 of these in like 8 days. And I keep reading, and I rated this third book the highest yet at 4 stars. Right now I'm in the middle of book 4, and I'm not liking it quite as well as the previous characters in the other books. So I don't know, it's gonna have to take another turn for me in the second half to be as strong, but we'll see. And I'm pretty sure I'm gonna try to do a video on alien romance and these 3 books, or 3 or 4 books in particular, so keep an eye out for that. Or if you don't have any interest in that, then leave that down in the comments and maybe I won't, and that'll be all you got. The last book that I finished in April was Demon from the Dark. This is the next book in the Immortals After Dark series, book number 9. This is by Kresley. We follow Malcolm and Caro in this book. I really enjoyed this book while I was listening to it, but I had like no memory of it. Even 5 days later when I was trying to compile this list, I was like, who's in this book? And I think that was partly just because I'm now up to book 9 of this series. Sometimes it's hard to remember which book is which couple. But as soon as I read the description, I was like, oh yeah, Malcolm, Caro. I felt like Caro was actually sort of the weaker character of these, weaker character development and layers between this pair, because she has like she becomes like an instant mom in this book, where she has a child that she has to take care of, and that's like it feels like that's her like only personality trait. They kind of try to say at the start that she's this like party girl, but we don't get to see almost any of that. We just kind of hear about it in her history, and she's just all focused on this child in the book and what her mission is and what she's going to do to protect this child, etc. And for me, it just kind of was like, I wanted more of her development, or I wanted to see her like make that transition from A to B. It just felt like she was like, well, kid, move on, you know? I wanted her to like almost not struggle with it, but like come to terms with it maybe. And Malcolm, I enjoyed because he was so extra. Like, he was just to the nth degree. He is this vampire demon, but he has this moral code, but yet he's also ruthless and super, super strong and powerful. And he really has his own journey where he is kind of like this tortured hero, and how he has to come to grips with his life changing and meeting Caro and what that means for him, his life. So and also when I was looking back on this, I thought it was kind of meh on the sexy times, just because when there are sexy times, there is a couple like kind of on page, and then a whole, I don't know, some length of time goes by, a couple days, and it says, and they were blissed out for most of that time. And I'm like, okay, I guess you just like told us there was a bunch of sex there. And like I said, I don't have to have a ton of sex in my books, but it just felt like there was some, and then there was like nothing, and then there was a little bit at the end, and I was just kind of like, it was okay. But this book just felt good, but like I wanted more from it, and I felt like it was a letdown after the previous one. So I did give it a 3.5, but maybe a little bit closer to a 3-star. So those are the 10 books that I finished in April. Again, I will update the page count here because I can't believe I forgot a whole book, but not the first time. If you have read any of these books or have recommendations for where I should go next regarding alien romance, or if you have an Avery Flynn that I should definitely read that was probably better than Parental Guidance, leave those down in the comments. I would really appreciate it. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Benjamin, are you lurking?
I am walking. I don't know if that constitutes as lurking.
I definitely was looking at this list and realizing that I never tracked the book that you and I read together.
What a goof!
I know.
Well, get it on there.
Yeah, I'll put it right here so I don't forget.
Jesus.
Okay.
What do they pay you for?
They don't pay me.
Well, get on that.
You should pay me.